Just make sure that that's for recommendation 90 on page 96.
Yeah, recommendation 90, page 96. Delete small numeral 3.
Yep.
Yep. Recommendation 91.
Is it C3?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yes, C3.
Yep.
3.37 C3.
Yep.
I mean, the next one, which is about it's just a rewording of the Port Hills policy. It's not substantive. It still has the same intent as previously. It's just...
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Recommendation 92, 93 and 94.
we've done those.
You've done those?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful, thank you.
It's not as far away from me, so come and sit up here.
Recommendation 95.
Okay, so where to next then?
Recommendation 95 and 96 on page 103.
95 and 96.
Oh, we've done that.
Do you need to detailise?
They're all good?
Yes. No, that's...
Yep.
They're all straightforward.
97.
Okay. Well, that is a change because legally we couldn't make any change to stage 1 properties that were notified and zoned through stage 1.
Sorry, say that again.
97,
Yep.
we had proposed an accommodation and community facility zone. We cannot propose that because some of the properties that were affected by that zone had already been zoned under stage 1, and because we can't make a change to their zoning, we've had to either consider not including that zone and providing for or recognising guest accommodation and high level, sort of larger scale community facilities down those corridors. So we've had to change the approach and introduce it as a accommodation community facilities overlay. And it's not ideal. We accept that it does make the rules overly complex, but that's legally just what we had to do.
Why could we rezone?
Because some of the properties that we had proposed to be located in this accommodation community facility zone were already zoned as part of stage 1, and you cannot make a change to stage 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Recommendation 98.
So we can't really make this change because the Minister hasn't specifically directed. So this isn't removing rules, extent or prescriptiveness. This is actually doing something different. So how can we do that with the Minister's comments?
Because he asked us to, in an overarching way, to make sure that it was internally consistent. Yep. Basically it says, here are all of the things that that we think need to be sorted out, but sort of don't regard this as the final word on the matter. Go through and make sure that what you notify doesn't duplicate and
by simplifying any policies and rules that overlap.
yeah.
Well, this would have been rules that overlapped with stage 1. If you can't have one zoning on top of another zoning, so we've had to use an overlay mechanism.
But we could highlight that when we notify, can't we?
Highlight it.
We'll highlight it to the hearings panel when we get to giving evidence. You know, that's the reason we changed it to an overlay.
If it's, yes,
I mean,
if it's
if it's
necessary,
considered we can't do that within a recommendation,
we could do
we
it.
could do it through a way of a
submission.
council submission.
Yeah.
But in terms of a public, like, so when I'm talking to the people that don't like these motels and these travellers accommodations and, you know, they're just Riccarton Road or Beeley Ave, if I'm saying to them just in like one sentence what we're doing, what do I tell them in terms of making a submission?
Well, we're avoiding any overlaps between stage 1 and stage 2 policies and rules, really.
Right.
In stage 1, it was already zoned. Was it some type of, what was it in stage 1? Some type of residential.
Some of the properties were zoned predominantly, well, a mix of residential suburban and residential medium density.
Right. So if I say to people, if you don't want these to change into motel zones, then make a submission saying you want to retain the existing.
No, the zoning is there. It's already
Yeah,
in place through stage 1. This is just including an overlay over the top of it.
Yeah, and
So
an
people
overlay
say-
means there's some additional rules to give you greater development rights.
Right. So people should oppose the overlay
Yes.
if they don't want more motels.
That's right.
coming in.
That's right.
Oh. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Taking, I mean, if we didn't include the overlay, the overlay's going to go over some of the guest accommodation zone as well? No, the guest accommodation zone, because some of these corridors had guest accommodation
So
zone.
they were previously L5, so all the L5 sites have been rezoned as medium density, because they were the only ones that we could start again.
But aren't they in the central city?
No, none of this is in the central city. These are just the corridors along Papanui Road,
Beeley Avenue and Riccarton
Beeley
Road.
Avenue. Yeah, Riccarton.
Can I ask what's an example of a rule and an overlay to something that's already been zoned?
Probably the most with this is allowing for community facilities with a minimum building size of 350 square metres as opposed to 200 square metres in the residential suburban zone. So along Riccarton Road, some of those sites that are interspersed between a hotel or motel, they would have, what we're saying is that instead of a community facility of 200 square metres, which they could do under the residential suburban zone, you can build something as permitted activity up to 350. Now I will say that there, through the stage 1, there's actually been a shift to allow for greater scaled community facilities as of right under the residential suburban zone anyway. Scale, the size of building as a permitted activity, certainly for healthcare.
Residential recommendation 98,
That's pretty straightforward.
straightforward.
So, if you want to
And then we've got all of these statement of expectations,
and this
recommendations.
is where we need to take you through. This is quite a big change that we're introducing on the basis of the Minister's comments. So,
Okay.
Sarah?
So the background to this, the Living G zone, through the draft and the consistent feedback from the large block developers was that they wanted to retain the Living G zone because they were developing in accordance with that and were, had planned their development based on those provisions. So what we had done is just converted those into the new plan format as best we could. Some of them were a bit complex, but and had proposed that. So that was what we had proposed through the draft. There's been significant comment through the ministers, comments that the number of zones, the complexity of zones, certainly with this residential, we called the old Living G residential established new neighbourhoods, was confusing. They also questioned, we were proposing a future urban development zone, residential new neighbourhood zone, residential established new neighbourhood zone. And then there were all the other remaining zones, residential, suburban, transition density, so that in medium density. And it was originally, through stage 1, there was some attempt to try and integrate the Living G into the residential new neighbourhood zone, but it was abandoned, I guess, at that point because it was quite complex. We've picked that up again and as a means to rationalise the zones, made an attempt to reintegrate the Living G zone, so looking at what is most important to retain through those Living G zones provisions and carry those through, and integrate them with the residential new neighbourhood zones. There was a lot of concern that the residential new neighbourhood zone provisions that's proposed under stage 1 would be an impediment to the development of the sites, of the Living G sites. This is the Wigram, the Prestons, the East Belfast, Highstead, Awatea, Wigram, and Yolthurst Mesham. So we've done some over the last few weeks, some very quick analysis, and we do not consider that they would be impeded in any major way by the residential new neighbourhood provisions. We do, any concerns that they have about the residential new neighbourhood provisions, we trust will be resolved through the stage 1 hearings, such that any issues of their application through a lot of these Living G zoned areas, concerns with their application could be resolved. Nonetheless, we are suggesting that we retain some of the the applicability of the residential new neighbourhood zone provisions are a little bit, may impede the development of the density A areas in the Living Gs. Now, the density A areas were your higher density areas under the outline development plans. So they were little pockets here and there in a lot of the these Living G zones. So what we've proposed is to provide for some higher density specifically within the standards. I do accept this is very complex, and it is quite complex. We actually, as council officers, we're not even certain whether we've got 100% correct, but during this time frame and this process, we've done our best to try and integrate the Living G zone provisions, and through the mediation process and hopefully as stage 1 has progressed and decisions are out on the residential new neighbourhood provisions, we can work with the large block developers and refine any rules that are needed so that we don't create some unnecessary impediment to developing the areas. But it would simplify the plan significantly.
What this is really doing is rationalising what were a number of more bespoke zones into one overall zone.
So that will be welcomed generally, yes?
Yes. As I said, it certainly simplifies the plan. We expect there will be potentially submissions from the large block developers. We have included all their outline development plans, so we're in terms of the broad direction that's still required to be achieved in terms of the development of these areas. It really just comes down to detailed rules,
Right.
and whether they will work for them. And because we haven't had an ability to consult, we will have to do that through the submission process.
Yeah. All right. Yep.
So just really interested in what this means for things like cycleways. I know we've probably had debates in the past about ODPs and how they're pretty toothless and people just get consents and variations, and basically you don't get the kind of things that you would expect. So I'm just worried if we change from the individual zoning to the kind of new bulk zoning, that we miss out on those things that are really important, like the upgrading to the intersections in terms of allowing for that development to occur. So can you just help me understand kind of what happens to all those other rules that apply to the timing and the sequencing of development?
All in now, between now and when this is presented to you again on Wednesday, or by the end of the week, we have refined the area-specific rules that refer to those intersection upgrades. For example, Preston's had a number of them. Well, one of those, or two of those, are actually just about to be, one's completed, and one is near completed. So some of them are actually have already been developed, already been put in place. So a number of the rules that were Living G rules are obsolete now, so we don't need to carry those through. We will continue to carry through those ones. They had a cycleway required before 200 lots. There's a lot of area-specific rules we will continue to retain. So I'm very confident that all the intent of them, as they were decided through the various plan changes, will still remain. So those cycleways, if they were a requirement, they'll continue to be a requirement.
But I don't want to make it easier. What we've seen is that a number of the developers apply for variations through a resource consent process, and I don't want to make it any easier for them to get in this new planning framework to remove the requirements to provide the landscaping and the other features that they're supposed to do as part of the conditional rezoning. So are you absolutely sure that we're not going to make it more permissive for them to avoid the kind of things that they should be doing?
No, I mean, as I said, the area specific, Preston's was one of the major ones where there was a lot of site specific landscaping requirements. We're retaining those in the area specific standards. The other ones were mainly around intersection upgrades. There was a couple of cycleway requirements. And, the residential new neighbourhood rules are designed to have really good outcomes for these greenfield areas. So I'm confident that those provisions, as they finally, whatever they end up being, along with all the assessment matters that you're required to meet with the subdivision consent, I mean, they're still quite extensive, that you will get these good outcomes. I mean, everything that you're saying, you've spoken about is addressed through an assessment matter, subdivision assessment matter.
But I think...
You can't stop them making a variation and through resource consent. We can't stop that.
No, you can't, but you can have things in your district plan that make it easier or harder for them to get those consents based on the assessment. And so if you're getting rid of a whole bunch of rules around timing or sequencing or whatever, then I think, just the point that worries me is at the bottom of 107, whilst it is not known at this stage what the final provisions will be for the residential new neighbourhood zone, and that some of the hearings panel may address some of the concerns of the large block developers. I just think that's been far too optimistic that these developers are going to, do what's right. These are the guys that can afford to hire the professionals to argue their case. The community are the ones that have to deal with the consequences, who don't have the same resources.
I mean, one of the most important things are the key structuring elements that are set out on the outline development plans. For the community, those connections, those roading connections, cycleway connections, recreational areas, they're all identified on outline development plans. For a wider community or even a local community, they to me are the most important, and they will continue to be shown, and development will have to occur in accordance with them. So as far as that, I think that's addressed and will still be addressed.
Okay, and then can I just ask one final question on the timing? So is any timing of development changing? So if you take Preston's, the infamous MOU, still probably very much underdeveloped. You've got Highstead, which I'm not quite sure, probably not much happening there, probably in trouble. So have you looked at these areas and thought, actually the land's not really needed for housing because development's not happening, or the geotech has come back, or the infrastructure has come back, and now actually we wouldn't, actually it makes no sense to...
This is actually dealt with, I have touched on this when I have discussed the future urban development areas, more to do with staging. If you can separate in your mind the act of rezoning from the staging of land development, because staging of land development is determined, one, by the market to some degree, and secondly by the council's long-term plan, because that's when it puts in place the major infrastructure that will stage these developments. What we deal with through the zoning of land is making sure that if land is developed, that the adverse effects of that, say for example on the transport infrastructure, that certain upgrades are required before that land, will maybe, development's capped, the number of households is capped until that's put in place. That is continuing through these area-specific standards, as I stated before. The broader issue of staging of land development, yes, we constantly are considering that and reviewing when land is available. So, and there's a Ivan, what's here?
There is a
Quarterly
recommendation.
report.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a quarterly
land
report, the
availability.
land availability quarterly report comes out, and that sets out some of the staging of land development.
Yeah.
But I actually do go into that a bit.
There is another recommendation that will come to that with the future urban development areas as well.
Well, it's the one following, so there's
Yes.
residential, then future urban development.
Just in the
So is
package, I think we should pick up
the-
this on the
The recommendation on future urban development is
yes, but you should go because you wanting to keep it in this.
rezoning the following areas from rural to draft future urban development zone. Is that right?
Yes, yes,
And
that's
then
the one
include,
afterwards.
then rezoning all greenfield priority areas too.
That's right,
Enable land use development.
that's right, that's right.
Talking about changing and streamlining these ODPs.
Sorry, just above you.
Okay, yes. In terms of the outline development plans, there were 72 of them, and they had various. Preston's in its transport one had 5 layers to the transport one. Some of those intersections, where they referred to intersection upgrades, well, they have been completed, so they're no longer needed to be put in place. The other thing, Yoldhurst is mostly developed, or a large part of it developed now. Some of the outline development plans can be refined. I mean, there has been a movement. There are 2 approaches here. One, you can have very detailed outline development plans, or alternatively, you can leave it to the subdivision consent process to set out where density areas, a whole lot of detail. You can leave it. Over the last 10 years, I have seen both approaches taken. And, I personally think both work. They both work. And so, but when you've got these outline development plans, and you don't need to overly complicate the plan by having layers that are unnecessary, you can just pick up your key structuring elements and ensure that those which are, as I repeat myself, those that are most important to the community are regulated. Some of these other things don't need to be.
I understand what you're saying. I guess my concern is through this process, the community will not go into the same level of detail and not have the resources that they would have had as these were done through plan changes. So it's quite a different process to change this through the district plan as it would be on a case-by-case basis, enabling communities to go into quite high-level detail about or low-level detail about what the implications are. So one neighbour might, for example, not want the road going past their front, or might want it going around the back, or whatever. But it just seems to me that
That's not proposed. All that was suggested there is that through their mediation or submission process with the large block developers, that we could look also. We can't do it here before notification.
Right.
All those are going to have to be notified.
Okay.
But it's just an indication to say that we can streamline outline development plans for the living G zones, because some of them, are obsolete now. They're not
who
required.
signs off on it?
But we didn't. There's nothing you need to do there. It was just.
No, but when the plans come back, do they come back to the council to sign off on, or do they go to the
No,
hearings
that wouldn't
panel?
be. That would be occurring through the mediation process. So,
Right.
yeah, but we wouldn't be. Certainly, council officers are not going to seek to take away anything from an outline development plan. It would. I mean, you could clarify that by, it's refining, but not removing any of the key structuring elements that are proposed, through the ODPs.
I think it's probably useful to get, others might not worry about this. I just remember the Noble subdivision, dare I say it, and I do kind of wonder whether it would be really good just to have an example to show the difference between an existing ODP and a streamlined one, and actually get a feel for what the kind of scale and extent of those changes are going to be.
Well, there are 71 network and layout diagrams that this recommendation relates to. So why don't we just pick up the general concern and say that, direct that they be simplified by removing obsolete requirements while retaining the key structuring elements essential to the comprehensive development of the site and management of adverse effects. Does that work?
Perfect.
Good. Right, future urban development. Did you want to comment on that too, Yanni?
Before we go into that one, Madam Mayor, if we could just bring your attention to the smaller piece of paper that was put out, the changes to the table, page 3, the Riccarton Racecourse.
Hang on. Or do you need those words that I just gave you?
Yes, we do need
in
that
writing?
for the previous one.
So this is recommendations
99 to 104.
99 to 104. The residential streamline living G zone ODPs.
Be simplified by removing obsolete elements and retaining key
Obsolete
elements.
requirements while retaining the key structuring elements, ... So all you're doing is amending that recommendation.
Yeah.
It was actually to do with the ODPs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And take out the word the. It's
This is the food.
the living G, the living G ODPs. Yeah, and it's on page 109. Is that all right?
Yes, so
Yep.
you agree with the recommendations then on 107 and
Well, hang on.
108?
Well, I'll just move it and seconded by, that the living G ODPs be simplified by removing obsolete requirements while retaining the key structuring elements.
Oh, it's not
So
up on the board. It's not up there yet.
Oh, sorry, it's in front of me. And it's seconded by Phil Clearwater. So the recommendation 99 to 100 on page 109, that the staff's recommendation be amended to direct the living G ODPs be simplified, by removing. So you've got simplified. Yeah, so if you put by in little italics as well, and then they're the words that you need to change. Yeah?
It was structuring elements, and you said in addressing any adverse effects.
Yeah. I said ... so that I... Yeah, but I've got, well, if you're going to write the whole sentence in there, then we've got to direct that the 71 network and
No, you don't.
we're just going to, will do. No, it's not. It's direct that the 71, but we've just heard that it's not, we're notifying without this change. We're getting them to get on with the job of working with the people that are involved in these ODPs, aren't we? Through the...
The question I have is, where does the community go? They won't know that this is happening. It won't be notified as part of the plan, and they'll have no chance to see what the revised ODPs are.
But we're making it very clear that this is just removing obsolete requirements. I've fixed your problem because you were worried that they were going to change things that would take away something that the community would miss. We're only giving them the go-ahead to get rid of the obsolete requirements. It's actually just removing redundant material from the...
So just stop it after by removing obsolete requirements.
we can only do this before council submission process. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got a very limited time such that the community can see anything that's changed. It may be that through consultation, you know, the large block developers want to keep them all in, so we'll keep them all in.
Yeah.
That's all.
So can I just confirm whether the recommendation on page 107 to actually take this whole approach from moving from a number of bespoke zones to one particular zone called the residential new neighbourhood zone, you agreed with that approach?
Well, except that you were going to highlight the fact that Riccarton Racecourse don't want to be treated that way. So
That's a separate...
have you already dealt with that?
No, we haven't dealt with that yet. I just wanted to know that you're
It
comfortable
was on
with
Vicky's
this.
list, I'm surprised.
Sorry?
It was on Vicky's list.
Yes, that's next. That's what we wanted to come to. I just wanted to make sure in doing this recommendation that whether that meant that you are agreeable with everything else in those 2 pages.
Yep. Well, I mean, I'm comfortable with that, except that Riccarton Racecourse wants to be treated separately.
That's right. So we can go on to that one.
And given that I can't read this piece of paper because it's so tiny, I'm not 100% sure, you know, I mean, if we agree to one thing, surely we should hear first about why Riccarton Racecourse wants to be...
Okay, they are separate spatial areas.
Yep.
The Living G zone is one recommendation.
Right.
That's integrating the Living G zone into the, or rezoning the Living G zone residential new neighbourhoods.
Right, okay, so...
That is the first.
Living G...
Carrying through some area-specific rules, which
All right,
they'll be given to you by the end of the week to approve.
right.
There's a changed approach, yes. What we have tried to do is not penalise them in any way through integrating the Living G zone into the residential new neighbourhoods. But the residential new neighbourhoods is a slightly different approach because every single different Living G zone had its own different
Set of rules.
and that's what made it very complex. But we don't think through 2 test cases that they can still do their subdivision consents and build their houses in accordance with the outline development plan. They're not impeded in any way under the residential new neighbourhood rules, except for the density A area. So we're proposing some exemptions for them, that they get a 200 square metre, you know, which is what most of them did. But when we looked at all the heights, when we looked at all the, you know, did a comparison between the Living G rules and the residential new neighbourhoods, in most cases there was very marginal differences. So why go and have all these, you know, extensive and complex rules when the residential new neighbourhood should still deliver the outcomes that they're seeking? That's our...
How big was the smallest one? It was like
I
20
think-
square metres or?
Sorry, 200 square metres.
No, they had I think units that were 60 square metres, or maybe even less. Remember that little street where the cars backed into the road? That was the driveway.
I'm not familiar with the detail of
They had
that
really
area.
small,
Okay.
little tiny units, and people got really worried about that. But so, what's the minimum size? Lots, you know.
Well, under the residential new neighbourhoods, they can do these variable, that's the latest name, variable density areas where they don't have a minimum site size or a unit. They can just do multi-unit development or a mixed-use type development.
So worst case scenario, you could get like a 20 metre square apartment.
I haven't got the
Okay.
new neighbourhood rules in front of me, but it's designed in...
We've clearly exempted ourselves from these requirements for our social housing, so just saying. Well, you know.
If you think of traffic, like if you go from a development that you're expecting 2,000 people or units, and you suddenly have 5,000 people, it has a huge impact on your traffic. So I guess that was my.
But we're not reducing the size, are we? Across the board.
I mean the resident. You've been presented with the residential new neighbourhood rules.
Yeah.
You've signed off.
Yeah.
You've saying that they are appropriate for every other greenfield area, what we're saying is they're also appropriate for the remainder of the development of the rest of the living G zones. And that they should
Yeah.
work.
So I think that that's the answer, is that we've, you know, we're getting into, again, discussions around things that we've already decided. So can I just put this resolution, I mean, are people generally agreed that we simplify, use the language by removing obsolete requirements? Yes? All right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Right. Now, future urban development. Did you want to?
No, did you want to do Rickerton Road or GG?
Have they passed the living G?
Well, so have you passed the recommendations then on page 107 to 109?
Yeah,
with
yeah,
that
yeah.
exemption?
No, I'm comfortable with that. But do you want to do Rickerton now?
Okay, so perhaps we should make clear though then, the recommendations 99 to 104 are agreed with the exemption that
With the
on
yeah,
page 109.
with the exception.
Yes,
Yeah, that
That's
the
correct.
staff recommendation be amended to direct
Yes.
the, yeah.
okay, so that